6-year-old Emma Sullivan disappeared from her cabin at Camp Wildwood on July 4, 2013. 11 years later, she knocked on her family's front door, still clutching her teddy bear. Same pigtails, same Disney pajamas, same sleepy voice asking if mommy made pancakes for breakfast. Then her parents noticed the calendar on the kitchen wall and realized the impossible. What had kept their little girl frozen in time would unravel a mystery that defied every rule of reality. 6-year-old Emma Sullivan disappeared from her cabin at Camp Wildwood on July 4, 2013. Search dogs lost her scent at the forest edge. Helicopters scanned 200 square miles of wilderness. The FBI classified her case as one of the most baffling child disappearances in Ohio history. For 11 years, her empty bedroom remained a shrine to interrupted childhood, her teddy bear's absence more haunting than any ransom note. Then on August 15, 2024, she knocked on her family's front door as if she'd just stepped out to play. Same blonde pigtails with the uneven parts her mother never had time to fix perfectly. Same pink Disney princess pajamas with the small tear near the left pocket from climbing trees. Same sleepy voice that carried the innocent lisp of missing front teeth. She clutched the brown teddy bear that had vanished with her 11 summers ago. Its fur exactly as soft and unstained as the day she'd received it for her 4th birthday. David Sullivan opened the front door expecting a delivery driver or neighborhood kid selling candy bars for school fundraisers. Instead, he found himself staring at his daughter, who should have been 17 years old with a driver's license and college applications. The child before him was unmistakably, impossibly 6 years old. "Daddy," Emma said, rubbing sleepy eyes with tiny fists. "Is mommy making pancakes for breakfast? I'm really hungry, and Teddy wants some too." The words hit David like physical blows. Sunday morning pancakes had been Emma's favorite tradition, the ritual they'd maintained every week until that terrible July when she'd never come home from camp. They'd stopped making pancakes entirely after her disappearance. The kitchen table felt too empty, the silence too overwhelming when it should have been filled with a 6-year-old's chatter about dreams and plans for the day. Jennifer Sullivan appeared behind her husband, drawn by voices that seemed impossible. The pediatric nurse who had spent 11 years working with children while grieving her own found herself face-to-face with medical impossibility. Emma looked exactly as she had the morning they dropped her off at Camp Wildwood, excited but nervous about her first sleepaway experience. "Emma," Jennifer whispered, her professional training warring with maternal instinct. "This couldn't be real. Children don't disappear for 11 years and return unchanged. The human body doesn't stop aging. Time doesn't pause for missing little girls and their worried families." But Emma's response shattered every logical explanation. "Mommy, why do you look different? Did you get new glasses? And why is it so dark outside?" Counselor Sarah said we were having pancakes after the fireworks ended. 20-year-old Michael Sullivan emerged from the kitchen, homework forgotten at the sound of impossible voices. The protective big brother who had spent 11 years blaming himself for not being at camp to protect his sister suddenly found himself staring at the 6-year-old he remembered, while she looked confused at the adult stranger who shared his face. "Mickey," Emma asked, using the childhood nickname only she had called him. "Why are you so tall? Did mommy let you drink coffee? You look like daddy now." The family stood frozen in their own doorway, reality bending around them like a funhouse mirror. The kitchen calendar visible behind them clearly showed August 2024, but the child before them belonged to July 2013. Every medical law, every principle of human development, every rule of time itself seemed to have been suspended for 11 years. What had kept their little girl frozen in time would unravel a mystery that defied every rule of reality and forced science to confront possibilities that existed beyond human understanding. In the summer of 2013, the Sullivan family embodied the kind of wholesome American life that made neighbors smile and strangers feel hopeful about the world. Their pale yellow house on Sycamore Lane was the one with the tire swing hanging from the massive oak tree, the vegetable garden that Emma helped tend, and the sound of laughter that drifted through open windows on warm evenings. It was the house where children felt safe and parents felt blessed. Jennifer Sullivan had always known she was meant to care for children. At 34, she had spent 12 years as a pediatric nurse at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, where her gentle touch and endless patience made her a favorite among young patients and worried parents alike. Her colleagues often marveled at how she could calm a screaming toddler with just her voice or make a frightened child laugh during the scariest medical procedures. But Jennifer's greatest joy wasn't in the hospital corridors. It was at home, watching her own daughter discover the magic in everyday moments. 6-year-old Emma Sullivan was the kind of child who made adults remember why they'd wanted to become parents in the first place. She collected fairy figurines and insisted they had real names and personalities. Her favorite, a tiny creature with purple wings named Sparkles, went everywhere with Emma, tucked safely in her pocket during the day and placed carefully on her nightstand each night. Emma talked to imaginary friends with the same seriousness other children reserved for real conversations, describing elaborate tea parties and adventures that existed only in her boundless imagination. David Sullivan answered Emma's endless questions with the patience of a man who genuinely enjoyed her curiosity. As a high school math teacher, David was accustomed to explaining complex concepts in simple terms, but Emma's questions were different. "Daddy, if fairies are real, do they have to pay taxes? Why don't trees get tired from standing up all day? If I dig a hole deep enough, will I find dinosaurs or China first?" These weren't questions from a textbook. They were invitations into a 6-year-old's wonder about how the world worked. 9-year-old Michael Sullivan took his role as big brother with the seriousness of a Secret Service agent protecting the president. He taught Emma to ride her pink bicycle, running alongside her for hours until she could pedal without training wheels. He built elaborate obstacle courses in their backyard, timing Emma's runs with a stopwatch and cheering loudly when she beat her previous record. When neighborhood kids picked on Emma for talking to her imaginary friends, Michael stood up for her with the fierce loyalty that only siblings understand. The Sullivan family had rituals that felt sacred in their simplicity. Every Sunday morning, Jennifer made chocolate chip pancakes shaped like animals, while Emma guessed which creature each one represented. David read bedtime stories with different voices for every character, making Emma giggle so hard that Jennifer had to remind them quiet time meant quiet. Saturday afternoons were for family bike rides through Riverside Park, where Emma would stop to collect interesting rocks and leaves for her nature box. Emma's imagination was both her greatest gift and her parents' gentle concern. She spoke confidently about visiting magical places where time moved differently than in the regular world. During a family camping trip the previous spring, she disappeared for 20 minutes, later explaining that she'd been talking to the forest spirits about keeping everyone safe. Jennifer and David had attributed these stories to an active imagination, never suspecting they might be glimpses into something far more extraordinary. Their home was filled with Emma's artwork, crayon drawings of fairy kingdoms, construction paper rainbows, and finger paintings that covered the refrigerator door. She had a particular fascination with drawing doors and windows, always adding extra details like handles that sparkled or frames that seemed to shimmer. When asked about these drawings, Emma would simply say they were doorways to special places where magic is real. As summer 2013 approached, the Sullivans were excited about Emma's first sleepaway camp experience. Camp Wildwood had been recommended by other parents as a place where children could explore nature, make friends, and gain independence in a safe, supervised environment. Emma was nervous but thrilled, spending weeks planning what to pack and which stories she would share with her new camp friends. None of them could have imagined that this perfect family portrait was about to be torn apart in ways that would challenge everything they believed about love, loss, and the nature of reality itself. Camp Wildwood stretched across 200 acres of pristine Ohio wilderness like a postcard from childhood's golden age. Established in 1963, the camp had welcomed 3 generations of families who trusted their most precious possessions to counselors who promised adventure without danger, independence without risk. Towering pine trees created natural cathedrals where children's laughter echoed through morning mist, and crystal-clear Willow Lake reflected clouds that seemed close enough to touch. This was the place where parents sent their children to collect memories that would last a lifetime. Director Margaret Chun had overseen Camp Wildwood for 18 summers, watching nervous 6-year-olds transform into confident young adventurers over the course of a single week. Her philosophy was simple: challenge children just enough to help them grow, but never enough to truly frighten them. The camp's safety record spoke for itself. 50 years of operation without a single serious incident. No child had ever been lost in the surrounding forest. No camper had ever been seriously injured. The most dramatic emergency in camp history had been a broken arm from an overly enthusiastic rope swing attempt in 1987. The security measures reflected the trusting nature of summer camp culture in 2013. Cabins were numbered and clearly marked, with counselors conducting head counts every few hours. The main camp area was surrounded by a split-rail fence more decorative than functional, designed to keep campers organized rather than to keep dangers out. 2 security cameras covered the dining hall and main activity area, though the technology was already dated and prone to glitches during thunderstorms. July 4, 2013 dawned with the kind of perfect weather that camp brochures promised, but rarely delivered. The temperature climbed to a comfortable 78 degrees with gentle breezes that carried the scent of pine needles and campfire smoke. Emma Sullivan had been at camp for 3 days, long enough to overcome her initial homesickness and begin forming the friendships that would define her summer experience. Cabin 7 housed 9 girls between ages 6 and 8, supervised by head counselor Sarah Mitchell and junior counselor Ashley Rodriguez. The wooden structure sat 50 yards from the main camp area, nestled among pine trees that provided natural shade and privacy. Emma had claimed the bottom bunk closest to the window, where she could watch birds build nests in the morning and count stars before falling asleep. Emma's integration into camp life had been smoother than her parents had dared hope. She'd quickly bonded with her bunkmate Lily, a 7-year-old from Columbus who shared Emma's fascination with collecting interesting rocks. During arts and crafts, Emma created elaborate fairy houses from twigs and leaves, explaining to anyone who would listen how different fairies preferred different architectural styles. Her counselors found her imagination charming rather than concerning, exactly the kind of creative thinking that summer camp was designed to nurture. The 4th of July celebration was Camp Wildwood's signature event, featuring a traditional barbecue dinner followed by patriotic songs around the campfire and a fireworks display visible across Willow Lake. Emma had been excited about the fireworks all week, though she'd confided to counselor Sarah that she hoped the loud noises wouldn't scare away the forest spirits she'd been befriending during nature walks. As evening approached on July 4th, the camp buzzed with holiday excitement. Children wore red, white, and blue face paint applied during afternoon activities. The dining hall was decorated with construction paper flags and tissue paper flowers that rustled in the evening breeze. Emma sat at her usual table with Cabin 7, her blonde pigtails adorned with star-shaped stickers that caught the light when she turned her head to watch older campers prepare for the evening's festivities. The surrounding forest stretched for miles in every direction, a vast wilderness that served as both Camp Wildwood's greatest attraction and its most significant challenge. Dense woods provided natural boundaries that kept children contained within the camp's safe zones, but also created countless hiding places where a determined 6-year-old could disappear from sight in seconds. The nearest town was 15 miles away via a single winding road that most counselors had never driven alone. None of the adults preparing for that evening's celebration could have anticipated what was about to unfold. Camp Wildwood had operated as a sanctuary for 50 years, a place where parents' worst fears never materialized and children's dreams of adventure always came true. That perfect record was about to be shattered by a disappearance that would haunt the summer camp industry forever. The 4th of July barbecue at Camp Wildwood began at 6 p.m. with the kind of controlled chaos that made summer camps magical. Emma Sullivan sat at the Cabin 7 table, her paper plate piled high with hamburgers and potato salad, star-shaped stickers still glittering in her blonde pigtails. She chatted excitedly with Lily about the fireworks display planned for later, both girls speculating about which colors would be brightest and whether the explosions would echo across Willow Lake. As twilight approached, Counselor Sarah Mitchell gathered her 9 charges for the traditional evening campfire sing-along. Emma's voice rose above the others during patriotic songs, her enthusiasm making up for any lack of musical ability. She sat cross-legged on a log, her pink Disney pajamas already on beneath her camp t-shirt, ready for the quick transition to bedtime after the fireworks ended. At 9:30 p.m., as darkness settled over the forest, Sarah led Cabin 7 back to their wooden sanctuary for the night. The girls brushed their teeth at the communal sink, sharing toothpaste and giggling about the day's adventures. Emma carefully placed her teddy bear on her pillow, the brown fur soft under her small hands as she whispered her nightly conversation with her stuffed companion about tomorrow's planned nature hike. The fireworks began at 10 p.m. sharp, bursts of red, white, and blue light painting the sky above Willow Lake. Several girls pressed their faces against the cabin windows, watching the spectacular display, while Sarah maintained order from her bunk near the door. Emma had fallen asleep before the show began, exhausted from 3 days of nonstop camp activities, her breathing steady and peaceful in the bottom bunk closest to the window. By 10:45 p.m., the fireworks finale had ended with a series of golden cascades that drew applause from campers watching throughout the camp. Sarah conducted her final head count of the evening, visually confirming each girl was in her assigned bunk. Emma remained fast asleep, clutching her teddy bear exactly as she'd been an hour earlier, her blonde hair spread across the pillow like a halo in the moonlight. The cabin settled into the quiet rhythm of sleeping children, occasional whispers fading into gentle snores and the soft sounds of summer night through open windows. Sarah and Ashley took turns checking on their charges throughout the night, a standard protocol that had never failed to keep Camp Wildwood's children safe for 50 years. At 7 a.m. on July 5th, the wake-up bell rang across the camp, its cheerful chimes signaling the start of another day of adventures. Sarah moved through Cabin 7 with practiced efficiency, gently rousing sleepy campers and reminding them about morning flag ceremony in 30 minutes. When she reached Emma's bunk, she found rumpled sheets and an empty space where a 6-year-old should have been. "Emma," Sarah called softly, checking the bathroom before panic could set in. Emma Sullivan. The teddy bear that had never left Emma's side lay abandoned on the pillow, its button eyes staring at the ceiling as if keeping vigil for its missing owner. Emma's pink Disney pajamas were gone, but her camp clothes remained neatly folded in her trunk, exactly where she'd left them the night before. Ashley quickly searched the immediate area, while Sarah maintained calm among the other girls. They checked under bunks, behind curtains, and in every possible hiding spot where a 6-year-old might play an early morning game of hide-and-seek. But Emma Sullivan was nowhere to be found. At 7:23 a.m., Sarah's voice cracked slightly as she radioed the main office with 4 words that would shatter Camp Wildwood's perfect safety record forever. "We have a missing camper." Director Chin's response was immediate and professional. All camp activities were suspended. Counselors conducted building-by-building searches, while Ashley organized the remaining Cabin 7 girls. The dining hall, arts and crafts center, and infirmary were thoroughly examined. Every bathroom, storage closet, and potential hiding place was investigated with growing urgency. The camp's security cameras revealed nothing useful. The single camera that might have captured movement near Cabin 7 had malfunctioned during the previous evening's thunderstorm, displaying only static during the critical overnight hours when Emma had vanished. By 8 a.m., it was clear that Emma Sullivan had disappeared from a locked cabin surrounded by counselors, without making a sound or leaving any trace of her passage. Search teams were assembled to comb the surrounding forest, but everyone involved understood the terrible reality. In 200 acres of dense wilderness, a 6-year-old girl in pink pajamas had simply vanished into the morning mist. The phone call that destroyed Jennifer Sullivan's world came at 8:47 a.m. while she was preparing for her Thursday shift at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. Director Chin's voice carried the careful control of someone delivering catastrophic news to parents who had trusted their child's safety to strangers. "Mrs. Sullivan, we have a situation at camp. Emma is missing from her cabin, and we need you here immediately." Jennifer's nursing training evaporated instantly, replaced by primal maternal terror. Missing from her cabin meant Emma was somewhere in 200 acres of wilderness, alone and frightened, wearing nothing but pink Disney pajamas. The drive to Camp Wildwood became a nightmare of worst-case scenarios racing through Jennifer's mind as she pressed the accelerator harder than she'd ever dared. David Sullivan received the call at Madison High School while reviewing lesson plans for his summer geometry course. His mathematical mind immediately began calculating terrible possibilities. How far could a 6-year-old walk in darkness? What were the survival odds for a child in wilderness conditions? How long before dehydration became fatal? He canceled his classes and drove toward the camp with the precision of someone whose world had just become a deadly word problem. When both parents arrived at Camp Wildwood, they found controlled chaos that would define the next 4 weeks of their lives. Local police had already established a command center in the dining hall, maps covering every surface as search coordinators divided the wilderness into manageable grids. Emma's photograph was being distributed to every volunteer, her gap-toothed smile multiplied across hundreds of flyers that transformed their missing daughter into a public emergency. 9-year-old Michael Sullivan was picked up from his summer day camp and brought to the scene by his grandmother. The protective big brother who had spent years teaching Emma about stranger danger and wilderness safety now faced the reality that all his warnings hadn't prevented his sister from vanishing into the forest he'd told her was dangerous. Detective Amanda Foster from the Ohio State Police arrived at 11:30 a.m. with the specialized training that local departments lacked for wilderness searches. Her first assessment was sobering. No witnesses to Emma's departure, no obvious signs of foul play, and a crime scene compromised by hours of foot traffic from frantic counselors and camp staff. 9 units from 3 counties converged on Camp Wildwood by noon, their German shepherds immediately picking up Emma's scent trail from cabin 7. The dogs followed her path to the cabin door, then outside toward the forest edge, where the trail mysteriously ended at a cluster of pine trees 50 yards from the building. The handlers were baffled. Scent trails didn't simply disappear unless the person had been picked up by a vehicle or carried away, but no tire tracks marked the soft forest floor. The search expanded rapidly as afternoon temperatures climbed toward dangerous levels for a child without water or shelter. Ohio Emergency Management deployed helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras, their mechanical thunder echoing across valleys as pilots scanned endless acres of green canopy for any sign of pink pajamas or movement that didn't belong to wildlife. Volunteer coordination became a logistical nightmare as word spread through social media and local news broadcasts. By 3 p.m., over 300 people had arrived at Camp Wildwood, bringing enthusiasm but lacking the training necessary for wilderness search operations. Well-meaning neighbors arrived with family pets, thinking any dog could track a missing child. Amateur drone operators launched unauthorized flights that interfered with official helicopter searches. Jennifer sat in the command center, surrounded by Emma's belongings that had been collected as evidence. Her daughter's favorite camp t-shirt, her collection of interesting rocks, her carefully packed letters home that would never be mailed. Each item felt like a piece of Emma's soul that had been left behind while her physical body remained lost somewhere in the vast wilderness. As the first day ended without finding any trace of Emma Sullivan, the harsh reality began settling over everyone involved. Despite hundreds of searchers, advanced technology, and perfect weather conditions, a 6-year-old girl had vanished as completely as if she'd never existed. The forest had swallowed her whole, leaving behind only questions and a teddy bear that kept vigil on an empty pillow. By October 2013, Emma Sullivan's bedroom had become a museum of interrupted childhood that Jennifer couldn't bear to change. The fairy figurines remained arranged exactly as Emma had left them on July 3rd, before departing for what should have been a week of summer camp adventures. Sparkles, the purple-winged fairy that had been Emma's favorite, sat on the windowsill watching the street, as if waiting for her 6-year-old owner to skip up the front walkway with stories about new friends and campfire songs. The search for Emma had officially ended after 6 weeks, though volunteers continued weekend expeditions through Ohio's wilderness areas for months afterward. Camp Wildwood never reopened, its cabins eventually reclaimed by the forest as insurance lawsuits and parental guilt destroyed the institution that had promised safety for 50 years. The property became a haunted landmark, a place where local teenagers dared each other to spend nights among the abandoned buildings where a little girl had vanished without explanation. Jennifer's career as a pediatric nurse became impossible to sustain. Every 6-year-old patient triggered memories of Emma's gap-toothed smile and endless questions about how the world worked. After 18 months of medical leave, Jennifer transferred to adult oncology, where she could focus on healing people whose faces didn't remind her of the daughter who might be somewhere in the wilderness, afraid and calling for mommy. David threw himself into teaching with an intensity that worried his colleagues and students. He volunteered for every summer school assignment, every tutoring program, every opportunity to fill the July and August months that had become anniversaries of loss rather than celebrations of family time. Mathematics became his refuge, a world where problems had solutions and equations balanced perfectly, unlike the chaotic reality of a missing child case that defied every logical explanation. Michael Sullivan grew from 9 to 20 during those 11 years, carrying the weight of survivor's guilt that no amount of family therapy could completely erase. He'd been the protective big brother who taught Emma about stranger danger, about staying close to adults, about never wandering off alone. The irony that she'd disappeared from the safest possible environment, surrounded by trained counselors, only deepened his sense of failure. He chose criminal justice as his college major, driven by the need to understand how children could vanish so completely. The Sullivan house on Sycamore Lane became a shrine to hope and despair. The tire swing still hung from the oak tree, though no child had used it in a decade. Emma's artwork remained taped to the refrigerator, the bright crayon drawings fading but still depicting doorways and windows that seemed to shimmer with possibility. Neighbors learned not to ask about developments in the case, understanding that the family had exhausted hope and learned to live with questions instead of answers. Private investigator Robert Chun was hired in 2016, 3 years after the official search ended. Chun had successfully located missing children in 17 previous cases, reuniting families and solving mysteries that had stumped law enforcement agencies. But Emma's file left him as baffled as everyone else. No credible sightings despite extensive media coverage. No evidence of abduction despite thorough investigation of known predators. No logical explanation for how a supervised 6-year-old could vanish from a secure environment without leaving traces. The missing person case generated hundreds of false leads over the years. Psychics claimed to receive visions of Emma in various locations across the country. Well-meaning citizens reported sightings of children who shared her coloring but not her distinctive features. Each tip required investigation, taking Detective Foster and her successors to remote locations based on dreams, hunches, and desperate hope rather than evidence. By 2020, Emma's case had joined the ranks of America's most baffling missing children mysteries. True crime podcasts featured her story annually, generating renewed interest but no new information. The last confirmed photograph of Emma Sullivan became an icon of unsolved cases, her 6-year-old face frozen in time while the world around her family aged 11 years without answers. As 2024 arrived, the Sullivan family had learned to navigate life around an Emma-shaped void, never fully healing but finding ways to function despite the constant ache of not knowing whether their daughter was alive, dead, or existing in some reality they couldn't comprehend. The evening of August 15, 2024 began like countless others in the Sullivan household. Jennifer graded nursing assessments at the kitchen table while David prepared lesson plans for the upcoming school year. 20-year-old Michael sat in the living room, textbooks spread across the coffee table as he studied for his criminal justice final exams. The house carried the quiet rhythm of a family that had learned to function around an invisible absence. At 7:23 p.m., the doorbell rang with a sound so unexpected that all 3 family members froze. They rarely received visitors anymore, having gradually isolated themselves from a community that didn't know how to discuss their permanent tragedy. David approached the front door with the caution of someone who had learned that unexpected phone calls and surprise visits usually brought bad news. Opening the door, David found himself staring at impossibility. A 6-year-old girl stood on their front porch, blonde pigtails catching the evening light, clutching a brown teddy bear that looked exactly as it had 11 years ago. She wore pink Disney princess pajamas that should have been threadbare after more than a decade, but appeared as new as the day Jennifer had packed them for camp. "Daddy," Emma said, rubbing sleepy eyes with tiny fists exactly as she had as a child. "Is Mommy making pancakes for breakfast? I'm really hungry, and Teddy wants some too." The words hit David like physical blows. This was his daughter's voice, unchanged by time or trauma. This was Emma's face, unmarked by 11 years of living. This was his 6-year-old child, standing on his doorstep as if she'd simply stepped outside to play and forgotten the way back home. Jennifer appeared behind David, her nursing training warring with the medical impossibility before her. The child standing in their doorway matched every photograph, every desperate memory they'd carried for 11 years. But children don't disappear for over a decade and return unchanged. Human biology doesn't pause. Time doesn't stop for missing little girls. Michael emerged from the living room, homework forgotten, and found himself face-to-face with the sister he'd failed to protect. The 6-year-old who looked confused by his adult appearance, who tilted her head with the same curious expression she'd used when asking difficult questions about how the world worked. "Mickey," Emma asked, using the childhood nickname that no one had spoken in years. "Why are you so tall? Did you grow while I was sleeping? And why does everyone look so different?" The family stood paralyzed in their own doorway, reality bending around them as they confronted the impossible truth. Their daughter had returned exactly as she'd left, while they had aged 11 years without her. The calendar visible on the kitchen wall clearly showed August 2024, but the child before them belonged to July 2013. What had kept Emma frozen in time while the world moved forward would soon unravel a mystery that challenged every understanding of human experience and forced science to confront possibilities that existed beyond the boundaries of known reality. Within hours of Emma's impossible return, the Sullivan house became ground zero for the most unprecedented missing persons case in modern history. FBI specialists arrived with equipment designed to measure things that shouldn't exist: temporal displacement detectors, age verification scanners, and psychological assessment tools for situations that defied conventional understanding. Dr. Sarah Chun from the National Institute of Health conducted the first medical examination, her hands trembling as she verified what her instruments confirmed. Emma Sullivan was biologically, undeniably 6 years old. Bone density, growth plates, dental development, cellular structure. Every test indicated a child who had experienced no physical development since July 2013. The medical impossibility sat before them, asking when story time would begin. The breakthrough came when Emma casually mentioned the nice people who had kept her safe in the quiet place where days don't change. Her descriptions revealed a location that existed outside normal time flow, a dimensional pocket where missing children were preserved until conditions allowed their safe return. The beings responsible weren't malevolent kidnappers, but guardians protecting children from dangers their young minds couldn't comprehend. Federal investigators discovered that Emma wasn't alone. 7 other missing children from the past 2 decades had been kept in similar temporal stasis, their disappearances coinciding with events that would have resulted in their deaths: campfires, drowning accidents, predator encounters that were prevented by their removal from normal time streams. The technology responsible operated beyond current human science, suggesting intervention from sources with capabilities far exceeding earthly understanding. Emma's return marked the end of a protection period, her guardians determining that the dangers which had threatened her in 2013 had passed, making her homecoming finally safe. Jennifer knelt before her unchanged daughter, processing the miracle that had returned her baby while the world aged 11 years around them. The family that had learned to live with questions suddenly faced the overwhelming task of integrating impossible answers into their new reality. Emma asked why everyone looked different, why her room had been changed, why Mickey was so tall. Her parents explained gently that she had been on a very long adventure, protected by special friends who kept her safe until she could come home. Some truths were too complex for a 6-year-old mind to process immediately. Medical monitoring would continue indefinitely as scientists studied Emma's condition and its implications for missing children cases worldwide. The Sullivan family faced the extraordinary challenge of raising a 6-year-old daughter while processing 11 years of grief, hope, and adaptation to her absence. The case revolutionized understanding of missing persons investigations, proving that some disappearances transcended conventional explanations and required consideration of possibilities beyond human experience. Emma's return offered hope to other families while challenging science to expand its definitions of what was possible. For the Sullivans, the miracle meant learning to be a family again, with Emma asking about breakfast pancakes while her parents marveled at the daughter who had been lost to time but never lost to love. One 6-year-old camper who trusted wilderness supervision proved that even professional counselors couldn't prevent abductions that operated beyond physical laws of time and space. Emma Sullivan believed Camp Wildwood meant s'mores and friendship bracelets, not 11 years of temporal suspension in dimensions that science never anticipated. Her unchanged return exposed how missing children investigations fail when confronted with guardians who manipulate time itself to protect innocent lives. The medical documentation confirming Emma's frozen development became evidence that some disappearances transcend our understanding of reality and human biology. Those 11 missing years without aging revealed protection systems that government agencies never imagined. Proof that when children vanish completely, they might return as living evidence of forces watching over humanity's most vulnerable. How many other missing children have been preserved in temporal sanctuaries by beings who understand dangers we can't perceive? What happens when our search techniques become useless against protectors who operate outside natural laws? Can missing persons cases be solved when the victims themselves become proof that reality has guardians we don't recognize? Tell us. Have you encountered unexplained disappearances in wilderness areas that challenge everything about time and protection? Hit subscribe and the notification bell, because when children return exactly as they left, the real mystery is who's been watching over them all along.